Welcome to the Alchemist Academy. My name is Sunflow, and this is the first transmission. Who am I? All right, so I don't even know how to begin. I've recorded this at least 10 times. I just don't like the beginning, right? Like this intro that I've been doing, I speak for a good minute and I'm just like, this is trash. I'm starting to see now that the reason I'm redoing it is because I'm still too scared to kind of just jump in it, right? Because this has been an ongoing thing. I've been working on this whole solo episode thing for, I would say, like a couple of weeks now. But I've been finding excuses or things have been popping up because maybe subconsciously I want them to, so that I don't have to get to this and do this. I don't want to do this because I feel fear, right? I don't know how it's going to resonate with the listener. I don't know how I'm going to be perceived. I know that we shouldn't care what people think, but that's human nature. I think it's normal and it's completely natural for us to care how others perceive us, right? In a way that allows us to be more conscious beings, right? More considerate beings. But it's to a certain extent, right? Because if that's all we care about, to a certain extent, that's going to go ahead and hinder your growth and hinder you from tapping into your greatness, because sometimes you got to be crazy. Recently, I heard a really funny quote that hit. It was a deep cut. It said that in a room full of people, if you fart, an hour later, people are going to go about their day and forget that ever happened. But if you shit on yourself, you'll be unforgettable. So today, I'm going to be shitting on this mic. I don't know exactly which route I'm going to take or where we're going to land, but if you're down to ride by my side, then I'm forever grateful. Yesterday, I finished listening to a book titled Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. This book basically tells you how to structure your business like how the movie industry structures their scripts. There's a specific script that every movie follows, right? It has the hero, the guide, it has the villain, so on and so forth. There's a way that you can position your business in order to reflect that, to, I guess, keep the attention of the masses. One of the things that it spoke about was allowing others to know your story, right? What's your background? What's your credentials? But not saying it in a way where you're selling them on anything, just honestly giving your story. I realized yesterday that most of you don't really know me. There are some, right? Like since day one, they've been listening even before I had this official podcast. But for the majority, I'm sure that I'm just a voice, right? That provides something. So allow me to introduce myself. My name is Sunflow, but to the outside world, I go by David. David is someone that I created. Well, not created. It's a being that is a collection of different versions of myself that I use to conform to my surroundings. It was an individual that had been shunned for shining. So that character just decided to just play his part. Eventually, I decided to become like everyone else. I was blessed with landing a corporate job. I found myself a beautiful wife, procreated, bought a house, pretty much had the American dream. You know, what they don't tell you about the American dream is that it comes with a lot of suffering. It comes with a lot of self-doubt, a lot of insecurities. It doesn't allow for the exploration of who you are here to be. Because once you reach the American dream, then comes the conformity, right? Because the house is happy, you're fed, there's no immediate danger. So what's left after that is kind of like a feeling of emptiness. For some time, I felt empty. Like when I was in that corporate world, yes, I had my wife and I had my son, but like I wasn't like satisfied with myself. I wasn't happy. I was unhealthy. I was super overweight. I had rosacea. I was shaving my head because I was going bald. Worst of all, I wasn't really happy with who I was. Like life was just life. It was on autopilot, you know. You knew the amount of money you were gonna get because you were on salary, so you knew how much play money you had after. So if you played your cards right, you could invest some and take a vacation. That was it. That's what was life. That was life. I always invested my money. Like ever since I can remember, I've been investing my money. First, I started with like stocks, and then I did options, and eventually crypto came around in like 2017. Well, for me, it came around 2017, and I was always jumping on a deal, right? I was always like somebody told me about Bitcoin, and I was just like, hell yeah, I rock with that, right? Fight the system, and so I just started investing my money in Bitcoin. Next thing I know, I'm over here day trading, and I was doing pretty good. Like I was doing really good. I was making some crazy money because I was so used to stocks. Like stocks, you just make a few $100 here and there. But with crypto, I was making more overnight while I slept than I did the whole month of work. So like I did my thing. It was all virtual money, right? At that point in time, I wasn't a successful and a conscious investor to pull profits, right? I got addicted to the high of seeing the virtual number go up. But that money means nothing. It's virtual. It's not real until you put it into your hands. Eventually what happened was that the bear came barging in, right? The bear market came through and I wasn't expecting it because I thought I was a great trader because of course in 2017 you could put your money in anything and you'll be all right, you know? But I found myself losing money. It wasn't so bad that I lost my crypto. Like eventually like I gambled all the crypto earnings away, right? Cuz if you're not trading, you're gambling. That's legit what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, you're gambling with your money hoping that it goes in a direction. But you know, when that bear market came, I lost all my money, you know? It came to collect and it was all good. I was fine because I mean, I still had my salary job. Everything was still fine. The bills were still paid. But what was left behind was an urge to get that money back, right? Because it's kind of hard for you to go back to the 9 to 5 grind. Although it was easy, I had an easy job. I was divinely blessed with that job. I won't forget about those days when I woke up and I was like, you know, thousands of dollars richer. And I did nothing but just click a button. So what I was left with was like a desire for that money. Like now I felt lack. Before touching crypto and before even thinking about, you know, getting rich and all that stuff, like when life was just, you know, it is what it is, flowing. You got the 401k and you got this and you got that. Before that game came through, everything was fine. But then once you start tasting that fast money, you know, that can really ground you if you don't ground yourself, you know? And so that's what happened to me. That whole situation brought me to my knees. So long story short, I needed to find a way for me to get that money, you know, because now I felt like I was in lack. But there was nothing for me to do. The crypto market was dead, you know, like I was actually losing money because it was just like it was everything was just dropping, you know, and on top of that I wasn't smart enough to know exactly where to hold my money, you know. Anyways, so the market was no good for me to get into. But I still needed to get that fixed, right? How was I going to feed that addiction to that money? How was I going to fill that void left behind? So I started getting into gambling, right? So now here I am juggling a corporate job and battling a gambling addiction, right? And gambling addiction is like it's a vicious cycle because a gambler always believes that they're going to get themselves out, even though that they know they're just digging themselves deeper. So somehow in life, I was digging deeper in order to bounce out of it. You're always like leaving life in the hands of hope. Like, oh, I'm going to win big this time, right? Because I was doing good at first with gambling because I was good with money, right? So when I was gambling at first, I was doing awesome. I was getting paid. I was like, wow, okay, cool. Crypto went down the drain, but this is way easier. You know, I found out a system of how to play roulette, right? I would put it on a spreadsheet. If you have a long enough spreadsheet, you'll see where the direction is going to go next. And if you so-called martingale, then you'll be all right. But that only works, you know, for a certain amount of time. Eventually the house is going to win, right? I got to the point, right, where I was like, they know I'm so successful that they were robbing me. I felt like the casino was robbing me because it's virtual. And they probably were, honestly, because I mean, I was making easy money with this. It was nonsense. But life takes a turn once again. And I burned through all my cash. I burned through every single dollar I had. I remember going to the vape store and I swiped my debit card because by that time I had already cashed out all of my credit cards, right? And I think the vape juice was like $20, and my debit card declined for $20. Mind you, I already had the family. I had my wife, my son, I had my dog, I got my house, I got my car payment. So I fell to my knees. I remember one day I was in front of my house and I fell to my knees and I looked up at the sky and I was giving the middle finger to God and I was like, what the fuck? Why would you let me get in so deep? Why would you do this? You know? I guess I'm healed from those moments now. I used to think back at that day. That day was so vivid. It's you're so hopeless. Like you fucked up. Like damn, you fucked up, you know? And I always used to like to keep my image up. I had a good image. I had a good reputation, you know, like eventually like those things they need to break down to bring in the new you, right? In order for you to grow as a soul, you need to break the costumes off, right? And the only way that those costumes get broken is by force because you're not going to choose just to one day just be yourself. Something has to push you to be who you're going to be. So eventually that push for me came. Whatever happened in my reality, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, I was pushed out of that comfort zone into a new timeline, I guess you can say. Right? Because I took a leap of faith. That leap of faith was knowing that if I leave this job, I'm going to be divinely guided to where I need to be. Unfortunately and fortunately, where I was guided was to create my handyman business, right? Because now that I was jobless, of course, I needed a plan. My plan was to become a handyman because that's what I was good at. You know, the home that I had purchased was a fixer-upper, and so I got a lot of knowledge on how to do things, you know? And so that's the only talent that I really had. And so, you know, somehow I kind of convinced myself that I liked doing it. And so I created a business around it. After like a year, I realized that I didn't really like this job, but that's all I really had. Like it was starting to pick up business, right? Because it takes a while to build up a handyman business, right? You got to become reputable and build up a clientele and all that stuff. But like right around the time when business was getting good, I started getting a feeling that I don't want to really do this. Like I couldn't really wait to really hire an employee and start doing it for me. My heart wasn't in it. You know, I was really just doing this business to feed my wallet. And I didn't really want to live like that. I understand that's the name of the game, right? That a component of this game is this whole thing we call money, right? That's okay. It is what it is. You got to play that game. So I kept it rolling for a little longer, right? I kept it rolling. And eventually I had an opportunity to be part of a group mentorship program. And in this group mentorship program, we were going to be taught how to create a business from essentially our passion, right? So it was kind of divine, like, oh shit, perfect timing, you know? I'm feeling this push again, and this time I'm going to take a leap and I have a little guidance. And so that's what I did. I started, being a part of this community and doing my homework. And the homework we had, it needed to be submitted like through typing, through a program called Notion. But the last thing I wanted to do during those days was to sit my ass down and type, right? Because I was getting home after long hours and I was tired. I had cuts and my body was sore. Of course, I had to do the family thing, like, read to my children, hang out with my wife for a little bit. And then I had to somehow tap into my creative essence to kind of create a business of sorts, right? So I decided to have a little fun with it. And rather than me having to type all my notes out, I just decided to take out my mic and start recording myself. That way I can just speak my notes versus having to type them out. And I would just post them on YouTube and submit it as my homework. I think that was the first time that I tapped into a feeling of passion. Like before this, I used to like dabble a little bit on TikTok years ago, right? Like I think the universe kind of gave me the suit to try it on and then it took it away because I wasn't really ready. It just wanted to see if I was ready for it, or to see how it fit. But I never tapped into that. That's a whole nother story though. But here I was just submitting these podcasts to this private playlist, in my channel. And I called the channel Detention Notice. I called it Detention Notice because this was something that wasn't being done by anyone else, right? So There was nothing in the server rules that indicated that we couldn't do it, but it didn't say that we could do it either. So I figured I'd name it detention notice because I could probably get detention if they found out about this. Also, anyone else attending my classes to hear me, they were accomplices. So they were with me alongside this detention notice thing, you know? And so that's how the podcast actually developed and came to be what it is today. It started out as homework. It started out as the easy route to finish the homework. But then eventually, when I was pretty much done with the homework, then I started to think about an idea of how to continue doing this, right? How can I take this to the next level? And so I had the idea of actually speaking with classmates, right? Speaking with my peers, because I figured I need to continue honing in on these skills, right? Working out on these muscles behind the mic. But also, my peers will one day be in a position where they're going to be in other podcasts, right? We are all destined for greatness. So why not practice within ourselves? And so I started having a bunch of the classmates just kind of mess around with me and do podcasts. And then slowly I started positioning myself into reaching outside the class to other people that I found interesting. The podcasting is something that's interesting to me. I don't mind doing it. I do have a love for it. It's a little bit of misdirection, right? In terms of where I'm projected, where I would like to project myself to be, right? It's kind of veering off course. But it has allowed me to be where I am today. So I'm very grateful for it. But I find myself not being able to tap into the original feeling that I had of that love, of that passion, right? Of that feeling of purpose. Because when I'm on the stage with the guest, my job is to give the stage to the guest and hold that space, provide them with questions. Somehow like I feel a little bit of comfort being with them on the other side of that mic. And also I can dip behind the curtain if they're doing their thing. I can kind of just be in the shadows for a little while, taking a breather. But now that I'm on this mic by myself, like how I used to be, like I feel naked. I become the podcast guy, and that was never really the intention. That was never part of the script that I wrote for myself, right? Of course, I wrote that I would have a podcast, but I didn't want to be that guy that just interviewed people. So now I ask myself, okay, so if I'm going to be holding it down by myself, like if that's the main goal, right, to have these solo podcasts and just express myself solely, what do I have to offer? Like, what is my product, right? Because as of now, many, if not all of the listeners, they don't really know what my product is, right? If you know me personally, you know what I've been working on, you know what my goal is, you know what the deal is. But for the majority, like I don't express myself through my brand. Like all the time that I spend doing the social media edits, right? To like clip those audios, like that's about somebody else. I'm putting someone else on the stage, which is all good. Of course, I'm gonna continue doing that. There is a love for that, but it doesn't enhance my brand as a whole. It's just like a small subsection, right? So then what is my brand? What do I have to offer? What's my product? The only thing that comes to mind is me. I'm the brand. I'm the product. So I'm kind of brought back to what is my purpose. If what I'm doing right now behind this mic is my passion, ultimately that's going to provide me with purpose. I would have to say that right now, at least what's coming to mind is that my purpose is to simply just shed my individual light onto the world. I think we all have a duty to shed our own light upon this world. All of us have a gift. We were all born with a specific gift. I believe that we all know what that gift is. Those who say they don't, it's because it's right in front of them. My gift is my voice. At least one of my gifts is my voice. So I have to utilize that any way that I can, right? Sometimes I think that the things that occurred in my life, like those large events that I just went over with you, I think that they were all divine, like they were supposed to happen in some way in order for me to become who I am today, to be this person speaking to you. Because the person here that's speaking to you right now is not the same person I once was not too long ago. I could have never imagined myself doing the things that I'm doing today. There was a point in time where I hated to hear my own voice. And then I realized that it's because I didn't love myself. I hated my life. I looked in the mirror and I just wanted to hit that mirror because I didn't like that person. I was unhappy as a whole. My body was in bad shape. My mind was in terrible shape. It's like you don't know what rock bottom is until you hit rock bottom. But the beauty about being at rock bottom is that there's no way but up. So I sucked it up. I had to keep it going. I had a family to keep on running, and I had to keep the plane flying, right? So, eventually I just started doing some inner work, right? I started doing research on like manifestation and how our thoughts generate certain emotions, and those emotions eventually dictate into our reality, right? Because we are living in a simulated world where what we see is a perspective of our inner world. So mathematically, I would have to change my inner world before I even try to see any changes in my outside world. And so that's what I started to do. I hit the books. I read every self-help book, and I started looking at all these videos about meditation, manifestation, 369, all this stuff. A lot of it was just surface level bullshit, really. But like throughout that time, I started to take notice of certain things that were actually making a big difference in my life. Like things that I saw immediate changes. And so I started grouping those things together. And I created somewhat of a formula. And this formula that I utilize now, I utilize it on a regular basis. I actually utilize the formula today for me to get on this mic and speak. There are aspects of this formula that I utilize consistently. That's what I have to share, is my knowledge, my perspective, my journey, my gnosis, my wisdom that I've applied. And I continue to apply. Today I can honestly say that I love my life. I love every aspect of my life. I look in the mirror and I love who I am. I love who I'm becoming. Somehow I enjoy the journey through self-discovery. I look forward to doing the shadow work to see what else needs to be repaired in order for me to have a clearer path to the future that I desire to have. There are a lot of things that we hold within us that we have no idea where it comes from. And yet we find out later on through some research that if we go deep enough, it's rooted in something that's instilled within us that can easily be spoken to. We can rewrite the past in order to write a new future. I came out a better man after all this that happened in my life. For the longest time, I thought I was a failure, but I see now that it was just a journey that I needed to take to be triumphant in order for me to feel into my power. And I'm sure it could be off-putting for some to hear someone speaking about them loving themselves and feeling into their greatness. But as I said earlier, our outside reality is a direct reflection of how we feel in the inside. So the only reason that a person may feel that way about someone else speaking highly of themselves is because they themselves lack that courage to step into their power. But I know that it can be difficult. I was once there. I was there in a position where I would hate on others that love themselves. I would hate on others for what they had simply because I wanted that. But that kind of brings forward the most important thing that I learned throughout this journey so far. It's about commitment, making a commitment to myself. I needed to make a commitment to myself to make a change. But that commitment is not easy, right? It takes work, but one small step at a time. Like I am who I am today because of the small steps that I took that eventually compounded into something amazing for me. But that doesn't necessarily mean that my life is flawless either. My life isn't perfect. I have shit. Life be life and for all of us. I'm just grateful that I've been able to hone in on these skills and these tools that I can utilize for me to put my emotions and the current situation up on a pedestal so I can strip it away from all the BS, right? So I can see it for what it is. It's simply something there that's trying to teach me something. There's always something to be learned from what's going on in your reality. The events that have happened in my life, I understand now that they weren't happening to me. They were happening for me, and they were happening through me. My job was simply to live it out. The most important task that I had that I didn't understand at the time was to simply choose how I felt at that moment. We can all choose how we feel at every given moment. If you feel fear right now at this very moment, it's because you choose to feel fear. This game of life is a game about transmutation. You have to transmute the dark with some light. But that whole transmutation thing is a whole episode on its own, really. That's something I have planned on discussing along the lines. And to be honest, I've created a framework for what I anticipate will happen, of course, but I've just set sail. So I don't really, who knows where this is going to end up. But if you're down to ride by my side to see where this thing goes, then I would appreciate that. Thank you. I also want to thank my supporters. In the beginning stages of doing whatever this is that I'm doing here, it means so much. All the subscribers that subscribe to me, even if they don't watch my content, they just subscribe for the sake of supporting because of the algorithm, right? It's just how the game works. Those that give a thumbs up and give a quick little comment, those things mean the world to me. I can't really even express in words my feelings, right? I'm so thankful for those things. But we'll wrap it up here, because I can keep on going on and on. So I'll leave it with this. My life drastically changed when I knew that I was responsible for the events that were occurring in my life. I had the power in my mind to alter the perspective that I had with the events that occurred. Maybe the events just happened out of my control, but what I can control is my perspective. I can change the mindset around the situations that arise in my life. If the outside world is a direct reflection of my inner world, then my priority is to alchemize my mind in order to redesign my reality. Much love.
What was up is down. World has gone full clown. Everything's inverted and the other way around. So where do we go from here? Ten years came and went. 10 years time well spent. Truthfully, I will never be the same.